Rosa turned to Runcha, Vigo, and Rana. Since they are also flag bearers, they are responsible for the noise that Mew and Anna caused. Runcha will practice self-discipline for a while, and Ran and Vigo will return one family sword each from their vaults. Runcha just shrugged and agreed to it, while Ran and Vigo protested. Rosa did not listen to their protest. If she had her way, she would confiscate all the prestigious swords they have, so they should be grateful that they got off so easily. The brothers could not say anything in response and lowered their heads. Ran and Vigo felt like they were being accused of a crime they didn't commit, and it's obvious enough that their frustration and anger shifted to Jin. Good. What will be the actions of her youngest son now? In this situation, when she involved his brothers and sisters unrelated to it, would Jin pretend and persuade her to relent? Or will he enjoy her favoritism? Rose wanted Jin to show her how he would solve this situation. If he just stood there with a satisfied smile because his mother was on his side, then that would be the end of him. Even though Jin was a rare genius who reached the 5th rank at the age of 15, if this was the degree of his intelligence, then Rose planned to immediately erase all her interest in her youngest son. Needless to say, even if she was disappointed, he would still remain her favorite younger son. He would have been simply excluded from the list of candidates for the succession to the throne. If Jin hadn't done anything when she gave him the advantage, Rose would have decided that he wasn't fit to lead the Rankandel clan. Jin finally turned to his mother. Rosa told him to talk, hiding her excitement. The boy said that he really liked the mission assigned by his sisters. Rose asked disapprovingly if Jin knew what a rotten place the Kalin ruins were. Yes, Jin knew. The Kalin ruins are part of the Zippel territory that the Rankandels wanted for themselves in the past and failed. He understood the risk, but he wasn't going to back down in this battle. Jin said that the mission they assigned him was wonderful. The place is really dangerous, but he didn't believe it was an irrational decision. They probably decided that he had high enough abilities for this. Isn't that why they assigned him this mission? Rosa was arguing. Was he trying to get her out of herself? Reckless bravado. It wasn't a bad reaction, but it wasn't what Rose was hoping for. Jin replied that if they were to replace a person on a mission so suddenly, it would be equivalent to their incompetence. Rosa said that they would not be suspected of such a thing. His sisters were just trying to hurt him. Since they can't break him in battle, they use their authority. It was just as Jin's mother had said. Jin told her that if he faced the sisters head-on, victory would be on their side, but if he succeeded in the mission, he would deal them a strong blow. In other words, he has a chance to win this battle. The Kalin ruins are a place where he can die if he takes even one wrong step. So Rose asked if Jin was sure he wanted to go there. Yes, Jin was sure. He also wanted to ask one thing. When he successfully completes the mission, can he take back those swords that were taken from his brothers? This mission is marked dangerous. He asked to be allowed to receive at least such an award. Ran and Vigo looked at Jin strangely, and Rose hid an enthusiastic smile. The younger one was provoking his older siblings, as she had hoped, as if reading her mind. However, Ran took a deep breath before expressing his opinion. They were just swords. What was the point of risking your life for them? If Jin wants them so badly, he'll give him one of the ones he has. Just let him forget about the mission. Doesn't it seem to him that it will at least be enough to stay alive until their father arrives? Ran acted like he was worried about this outcome, but Jin was confused. Jin replied that it was funny. If it was that important, Ran would have stopped his sisters before they assigned him a task. Ran pretended to be generous and kind, but Jin didn't buy it. Ran and Vigo did not go against Mew and Anna when they decided to entrust Jin with a mission in the ruins of Kalin. Jin could see that Ran was acting this way to get their mother's approval. Rose said that was enough. If Jin completes the mission, she will give the swords to Rana and Vigo. Rosa said they were all free. As soon as all of her children left the room, Rose began to think. She was afraid that Jin would act like Luna, so she trampled on the pride of the others. But it didn't seem to be necessary. Rose was sure Shiren would be happy to see Junior growing up well. There was a satisfied smile on her face. Jin was the last to leave the room. Runcha, Ran, and Vigo immediately went to their rooms. Mew and Anna were waiting for him at the wall. Mew asked if Jin thought that luck was on his side. Jin calmly told them that he wasn't too lucky. Mew stated that the mission is a team one, so he will not be alone. Soon his calmness will fly off. Jin thanked them for their concern. He gave them an icy look, saying that they would see each other again. Along with Jin, 3 more cadets were assigned to the mission in the ruins of Kalin. Kajin Romero, Mile Haas, and Lima Haas. All 3 were part of Mew and Anna's faction. The Haas brothers were slightly weaker than Kajin, but they were still true knights of the 5th rank. Their behavior has turned 180 degrees compared to what it was a few days ago. Their sarcastic remarks completely disappeared and were replaced by courtesy and humility. They asked for forgiveness for their past mistakes. They said they wouldn't fail on a mission. Even Kajin begged for forgiveness. It's an honor for them to be with Jin. Jin replied that they would leave the past in the past, where it belongs. It's better for them to work and not get stuck in the past. Jin didn't believe in their words at all. What kind of honor could they be talking about when they were in the faction of Mew and Anna? Jin wouldn't be surprised if they planned to stab him in the back and blame everything on the danger of the task. Milhouse was introducing Jin to the gist of the matter. This mission was a search mission. The place is the ruins of Colin. The artifacts to be found are 4 pistols. Colin ruins. Initially, a settlement of natives was founded on these lands, but now the territory belongs to the Zipples and is connected with the kingdom of Phylon. Although Colin was discovered several hundred years ago, the Zipples, who stumbled upon the ruins and the locals, killed and enslaved almost the entire population. Of course, now they say they respect the locals, but this is only at first glance. Although they seem happy with the conditions, in fact they are only slaves. The lives and rights of these natives are not important to most people, therefore they are ignored. The reason Zipple kept them alive was to rule the land of Colin. This is a hypocritical act of imaginary redemption of the past. Usually the Zipple family strives for rational management, and their people are sincerely loyal to them. Be that as it may, the Zipples have gone too far in the past. They blackened their reputation for a reason, all for the sake of an artifact in the form of a mirror, which the natives hid most carefully. His existence is the main secret of the Zipple family, but thanks to brave journalists from Jean's past life, the whole truth has been revealed. The published report contained evidence of the atrocities committed by the Zipples in their attempts to find the artifact. According to local residents, it turned out that it is called the Fountain of Mana, a thing that a simple glance at could raise the mana level to the 7. With his help, the Zipple family would create an army of magicians, but it will start in 10 years. So far, they have not found the source. This time, Jin won't let the Zipple bastards take the artifact. Jin and his squad arrived at the Zipple family base. Mile unfolded the map of the Colin ruins and pointed to each point where Zipple and patrol magicians were located. The artifact they were looking for was in the 3rd warehouse. A surprise attack by itself wouldn't be difficult, but there was detection magic there. Kajin assured them that they would protect him at the cost of their lives. No matter what happens, they won't back down. Kajin spoke with a determined look. Their game was pathetic. Grinning to himself, Jin took out a beef jerky from his pocket. It seemed Jin was noble to them. He said that safety directly depends on endurance. They will rest a little and start in an hour. Jin handed each of them a beef jerky. 3 cadets gladly accepted the dried meat. As soon as Jin saw that they had swallowed their food, he wished them sweet dreams. All 3 of them realized that something was wrong, but it was already too late. The dried meat was covered with a sleeping pill, from which even a knight of the 7th rank could fall asleep in a couple of seconds. Kajin and the Haas brothers were already feeling sleepy and could barely stand on their feet. All 3 fell, entering the land of dreams. Jin would have been less suspicious of them if they had behaved as arrogantly as usual. However, throughout their trip here, the 3 cadets were constantly fawning over Jin. They thought Jin would let his guard down, and when the opportunity presented itself, they wouldn't hesitate to slit his throat. Jin put on his mask properly and headed down the mountain road. The evening breeze, walking between the trees and branches, was refreshing. He wondered if only dogs tend to follow their master's orders with blind devotion. There were 2 guards at the entrance to the warehouse. In addition, the guards stationed at the main and back entrances to the warehouse were not magicians, as Jin had predicted. They seemed at best to be warriors of the 1st or 2nd rank. This did not come as a surprise. The Zipples didn't need to assign magicians, an expensive and valuable workforce, to guard an unimportant warehouse. The guards seemed bored and kept yawning, waiting for the time to run out. Sometimes they even joked among themselves, laughed. One guard lost consciousness after being hit in the chin by Jin. The other guard, who was waiting for the story to continue, immediately pointed his spear towards the uninvited guest. Jin quickly turned around, dodged the spear tip, and used his momentum to elbow his opponent in the throat. The second guard's eyes lost focus and he plopped down on the ground. Only 2. Jin suggested that there were no other guards outside. There was a simple lock on the door from the warehouse without any traces of signal magic. That's how much the Zipples didn't care about the 3rd warehouse. It was impossible to suppress the sound of the metal door opening. Jin could have used some noise-canceling magic spells, but decided not to. If there was a mage nearby, the chances of detecting his mana were high. Before entering the warehouse, Jin inspected the interior. After a while, he noticed a familiar magic circle on the floor right in front of the door. The magic circle of blood and detection. It is known to the public as a security magic that allows you to find out the pedigree. In fact, the circle distinguished between humans and demonic beasts, as well as victims of the epidemic. Therefore, it didn't matter whose blood it was, as long as it belonged to an ordinary person. Jin approached the unconscious guards again. He then used his dagger to cut his palm slightly and caught a few drops of blood with his palm. After that, he sprinkled blood on the magic circle. Jin used the guard's blood to avoid getting caught after completing his mission. If the Ziplams had come to investigate the invasion, They might have thought that the magic circle had been neutralized due to a mistake by the guards. Suddenly, the magic circle flashed bright red and let out a sharp squeal. The agitated Jin flinched in panic, but soon calmed down and looked back at the blood stain on his palm. The stain was caused by the blood of an unconscious guard. In other words, it was definitely human blood. However, the magic circle of blood and detection reacted. In other words, either the guard is sick at the moment, or he is not a person at all. The guards turned into a mountain of muscle. They had gray skin like stone and eyes that shone red. Moreover, they were both growling like beasts and breathing heavily. It sounded like the breath of an orc or a troll. Jin didn't have time to ask himself what had happened. Jin cast a spell, the Wind of Silence. A gust of mana instantly overwhelmed the inside of the warehouse and formed a thin hemispherical layer. It was a rank 4 spell that reduced all noises within a radius of 15 meters. Jin decided not to use magic earlier as he didn't want to risk being discovered by magicians in the area, but the situation has changed. He couldn't avoid fighting the guards who had turned into monsters. They were already holding out their hands to Jin. Sharp and long claws grew on their fingers. His two enemies were attacking him at the same time. Jin didn't even have time to unsheath Bradamante. The monsters swung their arms one by one, taking turns, so their target didn't have time to breathe. The claws tore through the air, drawing arcs. Jin barely dodged the attacks, ducking, and stabbed one of the monsters in the ribs with a dagger. He aimed for the heart, but the monster barely managed to escape death by bending its body. However, Jin definitely felt flesh tearing and bones breaking. The monster let out a terrible scream. It didn't seem to be a fatal injury. The monster did not bother to remove the dagger from its belly and continued to wave its claws. Fortunately, Jin took advantage of this brief respite to create some distance between them and expose Bradamante. When he hurriedly enveloped the blade with an aura, the dark warehouse perked up a bit. The monsters seemed to sense that the aura represented a dangerous force. The wounded monster took out a dagger from his stomach. Seeing what happened after, Jin couldn't help but show shock on his face. They could regenerate, which was bad news. The monster's deep wound on its stomach was healing quickly and closing. This kind of high-speed regeneration could only be seen in high-ranked and strong monsters. However, Jin's opponents were not typical monsters born from nature. These enemies were undoubtedly humans just a moment ago. All sorts of thoughts and hypotheses raced through Jin's mind with every passing second. However, he did not have the necessary knowledge to understand exactly how this mysterious and bizarre incident happened. Fortunately, although he couldn't figure out how it happened, Jin could to some extent understand the basics behind it, thanks to the fact that he was a magician in a previous life. Zippel territory. A lot of magicians pass through it, and the locals are enslaved. These strange monsters were living golems. Jin came to exactly this conclusion. Creating living golems is a grave crime. Could the Zippels have used the Colin ruins as a laboratory for experiments with forbidden magic? The monsters resumed their barrage of attacks. Previously, Jin had barely dodged attacks since he was caught off guard, but now that he had regained his composure, his enemies' movements seemed clumsy. They had the strength and speed of low-level 4th rank fighters. However, there was a huge difference between a trained knight of the 4th rank and monsters who only had physical abilities of the 4th rank. Jin easily parried the blow, dodged the claws of the monsters, and counterattacked. Usually, a magical weapon, a golem, does not stop even with serious injuries. To neutralize it, it is necessary to destroy the core. It can be the head, the heart, or the stomach. One of these places is the core of the golem. The illegal golems were no different from the rest. Jin stepped back and changed the attack pattern, easily punching one of them in the head. The aura around his sword was spinning rapidly, so that a large fist-sized hole was formed in the monster's head. The core was not in the head. If Jin had fought like he was facing people, he would be in a predicament right now, having dealt a fatal blow to one of the enemies. Most fighters would switch their attention to the enemy that had opened. However, the golem with a hole in its head continued to swing its claws. His speed and power were not affected at all. On the contrary, she became more violent and aggressive. Jin turned around to dodge the attacks and stabbed with his sword again, this time in the lower abdomen. But this time he guided the blade until he reached the heart. Such an attack would be almost impossible for ordinary people. At such moments, Jin was grateful to his Rankandel bloodline for giving him a blessed body with superhuman strength. The hideous sound of the monster's flesh tearing apart and ribs breaking echoed. As soon as he removed his blade, Jin realized that the core was in the heart, instead of a real beating heart. There was a blue ball of mana in the center of his chest. However, this core looked completely different from what Jin was familiar with. Instead of a mana vessel, it looked like a large glass ball filled with some kind of blue liquid. Jin cut the core with his sword. He was angry that the Zippels had done this to a man. The remaining monster pounced on Jin, as if in response to the boy's anger. Jin still had to improve his position after he finished off the first enemy. His claws cut and scratched Bradamante, making an unpleasant sound. Although they seemed stronger than ordinary steel, they couldn't compare to the blade of a powerful ancient sword from 1,000 years ago. Pushing the monster away, Jin pierced his chest with his sword. He felt a solid ball of mana burst at the tip of his sword. The body of the fallen monster trembled, and pretty soon it also returned to its human form. Only then could Jin finally breathe and relax. The Wind of Silence spell he had cast earlier was still in effect. Suddenly, Jin heard a voice. It came from a fallen monster. No, from a man writhing on the floor. He begged to be killed. He hurriedly sat down and examined the second victim. Surprisingly, he was still breathing. Barely, but still. However, he still had a somewhat inhuman appearance. It was obvious that all of their bodies had swollen and ruptured. Jin soon came to the conclusion that he could not be saved. He had countless questions. How and why they became living golems, who was behind it, how they became experimental zipples. However, the guard didn't have the strength left to speak. All Jin could do was relieve him of the pain and agony. The Jin pierced the skinny neck, and the victim peacefully closed her eyes. Jin also closed his eyes for a moment and raised his head. He didn't know about their circumstances, but no human in the world could voluntarily become a living golem. Moreover, after transformation, they become expendable without a future. A flame flashed in Jin's eyes as he gritted his teeth. But now was not the time to lose his cool. An unexpected incident occurred, thanks to which Jin witnessed the terrible actions committed by the zipples behind the scene. And now Jin was suspicious of his older sisters, wondering if they knew about this truth when they sent him on this mission. However, he still had a mission to complete. He couldn't just go home and tell his siblings that he couldn't complete the mission because he was attacked by living golems. Even if he tells the truth to the whole world, the Zipple family will find a way to hush it up. Creating living golems was a terrible crime. The mere discovery of signs of living golems was more than enough to force the Empire to conduct an official investigation. However, the Zipples could simply feign innocence, even if convincing evidence was found. In this case, no one will be able to hold them accountable for this crime. That's the power they had. So far, Jin has decided to gather evidence and continue the mission, until the magicians made big steps. This meant that most of them were unaware of the real state of affairs. If they had known that the guards were living golems, they would not have been so careless with the protection of warehouses. Therefore, not everyone in the Kalin ruins is involved in the crime. Jin started searching the warehouse. The defensive magic on the stone slab was simple, but the one on the dishes was strong enough. All this protective spell was the reason why the difficulty of the mission was so high. The standard procedure is to spend several hours trying to dispel the magic, as if untying a knot on a rope. Jin sheathed his sword and gathered mana with both hands. 2 of the living golems were dead, so the Zipples would have to bury all the mess he would make. The mana in his hands acquired the property of fire. But then Jin filled mana with shadow energy. Flames mixed with darkness cast large shadows into the room. Since the Zipples will cover their tracks, then Jin decided to burn everything here. Explosive flame. The entire warehouse was soon engulfed in a frenzied blaze. Luna was furious. How could they send Jin to Zipple territory? She had 2 girls. It was Mew and Anna. The moment they were hit, they protected their bodies with an aura. However, the shock was so strong that they couldn't help coughing up blood. There was blood on the edges of their lips because of this. Luna asked if they were crazy. Jin was 10 years younger than them. The girls couldn't even look their sister in the eye. Luna wasn't just an older sister to them. Sometimes they were more afraid of her than of their father. Why did they do this? It was a question of the moon. Mew answered the question with a question. Luna was asking this because she really didn't know the reason. Luna said that's not the answer. Did the family's standard bearers start a battle for hierarchy with a junior of the middle rank? Flag bearers against flag bearers, cadets against cadets. It was an unspoken rule of war within the family. The 2 sisters couldn't say anything in response. Luna looked at her sisters for a moment. She said that Mew and Anna should be ashamed of themselves. Luna was sorry that they were the standard bearers of their family. The younger sisters raised their voices at the same time. The moon has never interfered in their showdown. However, the moon did not pay attention to this. If Mew and Anna had won after Junior's trial, Luna wouldn't have said a word. Jin had been successful on a mission in the Kalin ruins and must be reporting to their mother right now. Luna asked if he understood now why she was talking about shame. The 2 girls bit their lips. In the end, they gave Jin the wings he needed to soar. Luna wondered if there had ever been a situation in their family where sabotage failed with the same shame as this one. She told them to leave. Luna spoke one last time before they could leave. Judging by her observations, Jin is not one to show mercy. She told them to be careful. She was only saying this out of concern for them. Although if something goes wrong, they are still her younger sisters. Mew and Anna left without saying anything. When she sat down at the table again, a cup was placed in front of her. Her nanny, who was waiting in the next room, returned to Luna's room. Raise her hand to your juniors immediately upon return. She already thought that Luna was going through a transitional age again. Luna grinned. "What is the transitional age in her years?" The nanny replied that her puberty passed unnoticed. The nanny said that she was worried about Mew and Anna. Given Jin's character, he would never forget about such a thing. Luna asked if she thought Mew and Anna were no match for Jin. Yes, she thought so. She thinks that in 5 years they won't be able to face Jin in a real fight. Therefore, they have 5 years left to live. Luna asked me not to say something so terrible. They're still blood relatives. Luna also asked the babysitter if she found what Luna asked for. Luna was referring to the incident when someone tried to kill Jin at Tempest Castle. She asked her nanny to study their other siblings to find out who was the culprit of the assassination attempt. The nanny answered in the affirmative. First of all, it wasn't Mew and Anna. They were of average rank at that time, so it was useless to look here. Luna said it made sense. Then it's definitely not Mary and Jonah and not the twins. Then the remaining suspects are Joshua, Diff, Ran, Vigo and Runcha. The nanny stated that apart from Rana and Vigo, she could not recklessly study the others, since the other two are known for their deception skills. She's more likely to get a headache trying to look at them. Luna decided that they would just watch them. She didn't want her babysitter to get into uncomfortable situations by taking care of her suspicions. The nanny replied that it was a wise decision. She said there was no need to worry too much. Even after the assassination attempt, Jin grew up well. As soon as Jean entered the room, Jilly ran up and grabbed his hands. There were tears in her eyes. She thanked God that Jin was safe and sound. Jin smiled. Everything was fine. He said that soon even she wouldn't be able to beat him. But he was sent to such a dangerous place as the Colin Ruins. If something went wrong, Jilly would take revenge at the cost of her life. Murakin nervously asked his strawberry pie not to say such terrible things. The black cat, wagging his tail, asked if Jin had reported. Yes, he reported. People would probably gossip that he had completed this mission with outside help. But right now he didn't care about gossip. Jin took out a glass bottle, into which he put the fragments of the core of a living golem. He asked Murakin and Gilly to take a look. The heart of a living golem. Murakin watched the core with interest. He said that Jin was a favorite of fate. Since he himself returned in one piece, the golem must have been the result of a failed experiment. Had Jin found him in the ruins of Colin? Jin explained that 2 guards turned into monsters and attacked him. They regenerated every time he hit them, and this appeared when he pierced their cores. Murakin opened his eyes wide and his pupils narrowed. Living golems. Last time there was a grave giant. Now there are living golems. What's next? What was the plan of the bastards from the Zippel family? This news spoiled Murakin's mood. Murakin turned to Jin. In any case, if his words are true, then this is the work of the Zippels, considering that the ruins are their territory. Murakin suggested that Jin visit Colin again later. He wanted to ask them a couple of questions about what was happening. Due to the living golems, Jin was somewhat nervous about having to return to the ruins. But since Murakin would be with him, it would be a much safer journey than his recent mission. With luck, he might even be able to find the source of mana. Whatever mess they make there, the Zippel family will do everything possible to hide the situation. Jin nodded to Murakin. He will allocate time for this. Shortly after completing the mission, Kajin and the Haas brothers returned on their own, but Mayuana stripped them of their cadet qualifications and kicked them out of Rankandel. The expulsion of the cadets who had officially completed the mission was a cruel punishment, but no one felt sympathy for them. June 1795. Every time Jin lowered his sword onto a clean stone, a beautiful sound would be heard in the hidden training area. Zed stopped him. As of today, his training with the pure stone is over. Zed was expecting only twins tomorrow. Zed also said that Jin doesn't need to come to morning practice with the rest of the cadets. The head of the family will tell them something next week. The twins' ears pricked up. Although they were usually dumb, they could still understand what Zed meant by his words. These words meant that Jin was promoted to trainee flag bearer. The trainees of the Rankandel flag bearers were given one command: to accumulate achievements and win honor. It was a test. Honor is not something that can be obtained suddenly one day. Therefore, trainee flag bearers often left the clan for a long time and ventured out into the world on their own. Needless to say, the trainee flag bearers were not allowed to receive any help or support from the family during this entire ordeal. For once, Jin did not hide his emotions and express joy. Until now, his life in Storm Castle and Sword Garden had been filled with restrictions. He could only openly train his swordsmanship, but not his magic or shadow energy. The other 2 forces had to practice secretly, away from the public eye, as if he was a criminal. However, if he got the opportunity to spend a long time away from the Rankandel family, then he would be able to develop his strength the way he wants. Shiren was heading to the Garden of Swords. Not only was it an official visit, he was organizing a big banquet with all the guests. Currently, more than 500 Guardian Knights were escorting Shiren out of the Black Sea as a formality. Han reported that they would reach the Garden of Swords in 2 hours. Shiren said that the last son always interferes with his training. He planned to stay on the Black Sea for 10 years, but how many times does this happen again? Although Shiren seemed annoyed, There was a soft smile on his face. Khan had sensed in the Tempest Castle that Jin was unusual, but he could not even guess how much. What he was doing in the Garden of Swords really shocked the Khan. Shiren was silent for a while, and then replied, "Jin's fighting spirit is extraordinary. He was just a child." But his eyes betrayed deep regret at their first meeting, even though Jin tried to hide it. Remembering this, Shiren couldn't help but smile. Shiren Rankandel couldn't forget how Jin provoked his siblings as soon as he arrived at the Garden of Swords. He was sure that no one had taught Jin this, but Junior instinctively knew the rule of destroying opponents. His other children knew this and tried to keep Jin, but he survived and returned every time he was thrown into the clutches of death. And now he has the 5th rank. In addition to Mammoth and the ruins of Colin, Shiren was more interested in the first mission. Jin fought one-on-one with a warrior of the White Wolf tribe and won. Shiren had expected Junior to use his subordinates as a shield, but who would have thought that he could handle a wolf alone? With this, Jin was able to prove the weight of his own promises. Remembering the past, Shiren nodded to himself with satisfaction. Han asked Shiren if he really believed that Jin had killed one of the White Wolves on his own. Yes, Shiren believed that. In truth, it's not really alone. Shiren thought Jin was using shadow energy to kill the White Wolf warrior. Anyway, Jin was funny little. Shiren learns from Jin all the details of the first mission. The parade reached the Garden of Swords at noon. The Guardian Knights who were in the Garden of Swords had already lined up at the gate 3 hours before Shiren's arrival. The knights synchronously greeted the patriarch of the Rankandel family. Soon, Rose and the clan's standard bearers appeared from behind the Guardian Knights. Shiren said with satisfaction that Rosa had done well. Rosa replied that it was his children who had prepared everything. She didn't have to do anything. When she answered, Rosa's gaze shifted cautiously to Joshua. Shiren said that since adult children coped well without him, then he had no need to leave the Black Sea. Joshua's smiling face darkened and he lowered his head. The guests they will receive today will be overly attentive to Shiren. Won't this complicate the life of the children? Rosa replied that it was so. She personally prepared Shiren's favorite dishes, so she asked him to go inside. Shiren walked past Joshua and didn't even look at his eldest son. Strictly speaking, he did not look at his other children either, continuing to walk. However, Joshua must have felt humiliated as they were standing in front of the whole family. Shiren continued on his way, but stopped only once and stared at the 2 swords hanging on Jin's belt. Shiren turned to Ran and Vigo, asking if they had given away the swords he had given them. Ran and Vigo were undecided. Then, with a sigh, they replied that Junior had taken their swords. They agreed to hand them over if Jin successfully completed the mission in the ruins of Colin. Ran and Vigo wanted to dig a hole on the spot and hide. The humiliation was terrible, and they could not bear the thought that their father would be disappointed and lose all interest in them. However, Shiren just laughed out loud and patted his sons on the shoulder. It was just great. Let them make sure they get the swords back. Junior is as astute as ever. Sometimes he wondered if these qualities really came from his blood. Ran and Vigo breathed a sigh of relief. Not only did they escape their father's fury, he also made a joke, washing away all their worries. However, they did not know one important fact. When Shiren talked about blood, he wasn't referring to Jin's insight. He talked about the uselessness of Ran and Vigo. Shiren and Jin watched the banquet. Jin had actually attended several banquets in his past life thanks to his magic teacher. But this was his first time taking part in a banquet hosted by the Rankandels, even taking into account his past life. At that time, whenever the clan organized a banquet, he was not allowed to attend it. He had to stay out of sight like a criminal. The pure-blooded Rankandel, who became a knight of the 1st rank at the age of 25, was the epitome of Rankandel's shame. Now he was an honored guest next to his father. To think that he finally got to this place after he died one day. Jin felt proud, but at the same time a bitter taste in his mouth. In fact, if you look deeper into his emotions, bitterness overcame a sense of pride and joy. However, Jin didn't express his feelings and just waited for his father's next words. Shiren said that their family rarely arranges such events, because Rankandels celebrate only those occasions that deserve to be celebrated. In other words, Jin's achievements were quite high. Jin thanked him with a smile for his praise. Shiren gently patted Jin on the back. Jin was scared to death at first, but managed to hide his shock. Only his hand moved slightly. Shiren asked how many people they invited. Jin replied that maybe about 1,000. Right, since the last time 7 years ago, the number has increased by 200. Shiren asked what it meant. Jin didn't have to think about the answer. This meant that their family's authority had increased over these 7 years. From time to time, other families organize huge banquets, but all the 1,000 guests gathered today are outstanding people. Rankandels don't allow small fry or worthless people to attend their banquets. Jin nodded in response to his father's words. As Shiren said, today's thousands of guests were stars and celebrities. They were the leaders at the helm of the world, managing the billions of people inhabiting this continent. But even among all these rulers, Shiren Rankandel stood at the top. For 7 years, he did nothing but continue his training, destroying demonic creatures in the Black Sea. Nevertheless, the authority of the Rankandel family continues to grow, because in the current era he is the only one who has become the quintessential knight. If he disappears, it is very likely that most of those present here will turn their backs on the Rankandels. Jin knew this truth better than anyone else. Without his father, Shiren Rankandel, the family would never have been able to accumulate so much power and influence. Rankandels were one of the 2 main genera on this continent along with Zippels. But if we exclude Shiren from the equation, the gap in power and military power between the Zippels and the Rankandels will only increase and increase. Thus, the world is moving towards a system in which the Zippels will have full power over the continent. The Bement Empire, which was currently acting as an intermediary between the 2 clans, would definitely side with the Mage family if events took such a drastic turn. After a long silence, Jin called his father. If it weren't for Shiren, and if these people decided to turn their backs on them, if Zippels started to oppress them and drive them into a corner, then he would have abandoned his family. Jin stopped for a moment and met Shiren's gaze. Hearing the answer, Shiren looked at Jin. Meanwhile, Jin continued, if the Rankandel family fails without Shiren, it will indicate the incompetence of the next head. Jin wasn't going to die a miserable death under such a patriarch. He also asked the question of how many other people's vulnerabilities they have at their disposal. In exchange for the return of Brother Vigo's sword, Jin asked to see their family's custom contracts, which only the flag bearers have access to. The head of the Wernga family deceived the emperor and pocketed the treasures of the empire. But through the efforts of the Rankandels, his relatives can shamelessly attend this banquet. The Clover family recently asked them to remove the magicians from the Zippel family. Gerald's daughter sold family heirlooms to maintain her gambling addiction. Then she asked them to pay her back, and she still hasn't paid them this debt in full. At a glance, Jin got a bloodless weapon in his favor. He suggested that there should be a lot more weaknesses in the secret contracts that only Shiren and Rose are allowed to view. Shiren asked if Jin wanted to say that even without him he could have protected the family. Jin replied that if the head, without becoming the quintessence of a knight, heads the family, then everything will depend on his diplomatic abilities. Shiren said that all this is true. However, they are not the only ones who know other people's weaknesses. The Zippel family also has them in stock. Jin knew that. However, Zippels can never justify owning such things, because the role of villains belongs to the Rankandels. Regardless of whether the next chapter can use this weapon or not, Jin will abandon the family without hesitation. And then he will be preparing for revenge on the Zippels, no matter how long it takes. Whether they secretly experimented with forbidden magic in the ruins of Colin, whether they found a fountain of mana and used it to print out the magicians of the Seven. As in a factory, the Zippels were still a family that symbolized goodness and justice for society. They could not openly commit evil deeds like the Rankandels. Shiren laughed. Revenge means you have to be alive to get revenge. It wasn't that bad. Shiren was quite pleased with Jin's answer. The other children did not have the courage to talk in front of him about the possibility of the fall of the Rankandels. They were just bragging or whining. Not that his other children didn't have similar ideas in their heads, but their problem was that they didn't dare to assume that the Rankandel family would be destroyed and say it out loud to their father. Meanwhile, Jin's honest and confident beliefs were a breath of fresh air for Shiren. The boy was not conceited and did not get ahead of himself. Calculating wasn't exactly the word to describe him right now. Composure was the best choice, and this collected attitude of his was something that Shiren was very pleased with in Jin. Shiren only regretted that Jin showed up so late. It was as if Luna's talent, Marie's wild nature, and Deef's fighting spirit were combined in one body. Minimum 10 years, maximum 15. This was Shiren's prediction of how long he would be able to defend his position as patriarch. Now he was curious to see if Junior would be able to change the current hierarchy of candidates for heirs during this time. Now watching Jin will become his new entertainment and hobby. Most of the guests have already arrived. It was time for them to go to them. There was also something Shiren would like to discuss with Jin after the banquet. Jin's promotion to trainee flag bearer. That was what the conversation was going to be about. Since he had already heard about it from his uncle, Jin was not very surprised. However, hearing about it directly from the father's mouth was a completely different feeling. It looks like he will leave the family soon. The next 4 days of admission will be really long. Shiren and Jin left the balcony and entered the central hall. They went up to the second floor and waited for the guests to arrive and greet them when suddenly the butlers rushed to Shiren. They reported that guests had arrived uninvited, guests who have not sent an official request. The Zippels came. The butler continued to report to the patriarch with a worried look. There were 5 of them, assistant head Andre Zippel with his family. It was audacious of them. Shiren ordered Heinz to tell Andre to get out and invite the others inside. only let it be done not by him, but by the servants. Andre Zippel really brazenly intruded, but Jin didn't think that his father would reject the deputy magicians like this. As soon as the butlers left, Siran turned to Jin and asked if Jin thought he was being too rude to Andre. Jin replied that it was quite suitable at the moment when Andre Zippel expresses his displeasure and leaves with his family. He will ignore the order of the head of the Rankandels to enter the rest of the four, and this is forbidden in the Garden of Swords. Exactly, Andre will comply. If not, he will return home with his legs cut off. If Andre had come uninvited to a banquet hosted by another family, the head would have had to let him in, despite the discomfort. However, no matter how influential and powerful he was as a great magician, he was just a man compared to Shiren, who entered the demigod realm. A slightly strong man, but a man nonetheless. And even if Shiren turns Andre into a cripple, the Zippels won't start a full-scale war against the Rankandels. However, they will take revenge as soon as Shiren passes away. Shiren looked at the guests and said words of gratitude that they had walked all the way to the Garden of Swords. Having received such a beautiful son in his declining years, it seems that he will finally be able to get rid of his burden. Shiren wanted the others to express gratitude to his youngest son, Jean Rankandel. There were numerous claps, as at every official banquet, followed by cheers and applause. However, the banquets arranged by the Rankandels were known for their originality. Greetings were short, and the hosts did not accept gifts. Only 2 rules apply at the Rankandel banquet. If you get involved in a fight while drunk, you should follow the guards to the arena. The loser must submit, and the winner must show mercy. After all, they're at a banquet. Jin realized that battles were inevitable. 1,000 influential and powerful figures from all over the world gathered in one place. Many of them held a grudge against other guests, so confrontation and arguments were inevitable, since the guests would get drunk from the available alcohol. At ordinary banquets, 2 hostile parties simply looked at each other from afar or just had light verbal arguments. But the banquets hosted by the Rankandels were different. If 2 drunken sworn enemies met eyes, they just had to go to the arena without making a fuss. The only rules were not to kill and accept the results of duels. Some would be ashamed not to be able to kill their sworn enemy, but it was still quite pleasant for the winner to beat and knock his opponent down. The loser even had to admit that he was weaker and lower, which was very nice. Shiren wished them a good time. More applause followed. Jin couldn't help but think that their family was crazy without a doubt. Shiren turned to Jin. If he finds someone he likes, then let him drag him into the arena. However, he should not choose those who look weaker than him, unless of course they have offended him or his family. Losing was also prohibited. If Jin loses, then Shiren will take everything back, starting with Bradamante and ending with his nanny. Jin replied that he would know. Shiren was the first to go down and mingle with the guests. Although he organized this banquet for Jin, he did not plan to drag his son everywhere with him and show off in front of the guests. Jin saw his father off with a bow. Jin chuckled, watching his father's back. But it was the first time they had talked to their father like this. He couldn't even dream of such a thing in his previous life. They've been communicating like father and son all this time. However, his task in this life is not to get his father's recognition or become a favorite. His only goal is to surpass his father. In truth, this is what Shiren most wanted from his children. But there was no way Jin could find out about it. Jin took a glass of wine from the tray of one of the busy servants. Expensive and famous wine, which even a rich aristocrat opened only on special days, was distributed like cheap water. The first to speak to Jin were none other than the Tone twins. Jin looked at his brothers standing nearby and smiled. When Jin greeted them joyfully, color returned to the twins' faces. Among all these guests, they wanted to use Jin's fame to enhance their position and reputation. Something like "we are close to him." When he awkwardly replied, Daytona gathered all his courage inside himself and put his hand on Jin's shoulders. Meanwhile, Jin found the twins' anxiety and desperate attempts quite endearing and allowed his brother to do whatever he wanted. Instead, he quietly whispered in Daytona's ear that it was enough to look natural. Now let them go. Daytona barely managed to contain the look of horror on his face, after which he nodded cautiously. The Tone twins then stayed for a while longer, chatting with Jin before leaving. The twins' departure was like a dam breaking. Having emptied the place, the guests, who were looking at the night star, began to approach him one by one. So, the guests formally but warmly greeted Jin one by one. Suddenly, one bulky man loomed over Jin, ruffled his hair and spoke loudly in a casual and friendly manner. The man said that he was just dying of curiosity, wondering what kind of child received the 5th rank at the age of 15. He said Jin was so small. Jin looked 10 years younger than him. He called himself a Wooger. Wooger didn't give his last name because he thought Jin would recognize him, and he did. He was a talented, strong and promising warrior from the Tuco family. Maybe it was because he was respected in the family, but Wooger seemed to have forgotten that he was in the Garden of Swords, the main house of the Rankandel family, and that he had to show proper manners. So, Jin smiled gently and replied that it was nice to meet you. The air around them immediately became heavy. Tension spread among the guests watching their communication. Wooger quickly withdrew his hand, asking if Jin was going to shame him for talking to him a little informally. He said that although Jin was a Rankandel, he was still his senior in the martial arts world. Wooger said he was a little excited to have such an exceptional junior. Jin realized that he needed to explain the current situation in great detail in order to fill the idiot's empty head. Jin told the Wooger from the Tuco family to listen carefully. His behavior was an insult not only to Jin, but also to all the guests, who showed him due respect. If Wooger really cared so much about the relationship between seniors and juniors, then he should have been much more careful than usual. First and second standard bearers of the Ken family, Knight Order of the Dragon King, Order of the Black King. Wooger was the youngest of them all. If he had eyes and ears, then he should have noticed how they had behaved towards Jin so far. Jin told him to admit his mistake and apologize. He will turn a blind eye to this incident, as he has just given his word. The rest of the guests came up to Wooger and patted him on the back and shoulders to defuse the situation. They were all senior martial artists who were close to Wooger. They said that young Master Jin had saved his life. They asked to do as Jin wanted. They knew that Wooger would get in trouble because of his long tongue. Since they were saying that, Wooger lowered his head and apologized. Jin was not narrow-minded and forgave Wooger's insolence. The situation, which could have escalated terribly, has ended. After a while, the guests around Jin slowly returned to their original groups. Soon, Luna, who was watching this spectacle from the other side of the banquet hall, slowly approached Jin, saying that he had a talent for finding enemies. In her opinion, it would be nice if he behaved like an ordinary child from time to time. The two of them lightly clinked glasses. Jin replied that if so many guests weren't looking at them, he would have shrugged and walked on. But now he was no different from the representative of the Rankandel clan, so he had to force himself to become a strict and uncompromising figure of power. Luna asked what Jin would do if Wooger challenged him to a duel. She assumed that Wooger had the 6th rank. Jin thought that was unlikely, and if he really challenged him to a duel, the patriarch of the Tuco family and the elders who were nervously watching would rush over at full speed to take the Wooger away from him. Jin imperceptibly shifted his gaze, and Luna turned her attention. The patriarch of the Tuco family personally scolded Wooger for his behavior. Did Jin really want to tell her that he had even considered this in his calculations? And when did you just learn how the elite hides all quarrels and agreements? Jin replied that if there was a person who could teach him such things, it would be nice to keep him around. Luna said that learning how to wield a sword was enough. What else is needed? Jin was sure that this would be hard for Luna to understand. There was a lot more that was needed to survive in a family where he was so hated. Luna tilted her head charmingly, as if she really had no idea what Jin was talking about. She was born a predator, and all her life she didn't have to be afraid of others. So it's no surprise that Luna found Jin intriguing. On the other hand, Jin watched his older sister with amazement and wonder. Meanwhile, Luna thought to herself that Jin is talented and has a head on his shoulders. Is that why they tried to kill him in the Castle of the Storm? She was wondering about which of their siblings had noticed Jin's talents so early. Anyway, she came to this banquet to congratulate Jin. But as she thought, this kind of event is not for her. Now she will go to another, more pleasant place. Jin asked if she was leaving. Yes, Jin is still too young to dance with her right now. As soon as he is old enough, she will take him to a fun place that she knew about. Jin replied that he would look forward to it. Before leaving, Luna should try to send a message in the elite way. She came up to him and with one hand tilted his head to her, expressing her love. It will become clear to everyone how much she values Jin. She whispered that then few people would dare to be rude to him in fear of her. After that she left. As the moon whispered, the guests watching this scene could barely contain the amazement and shock that appeared on their faces. The white whale, who was known for not contacting his siblings, openly and proudly demonstrated his love and affection for the younger one. Moreover, the men secretly in love with the moon were divided into two groups. One group realized that they needed to find Jin's good side and used the boy to get a chance to meet and talk to Luna. Meanwhile, the other group were crazy, jealous people, and one person in particular expressed his displeasure. He, who considered himself the biggest fan of the moon, was Buber Gaston. He said to Vishkul that he was ready to die of envy. He also dreamed of putting his head on the head of the moon. Buber Gaston decided that he would write a poem for the moon, and he will perform it all night. All night. Meanwhile, Vishkul Iviliano's head was ready to explode with irritation. He had come to this banquet using his position as the next patriarch of the Iviliano clan. But his true purpose was to observe the movements and actions of the Rankandel clan for Kanzilo. Initially, he planned to come alone, but Buber begged him to take him with him as an assistant and threw a tantrum until vice leader Kanzilo agreed to it. Vishkul irritably asked him to shut up. A woman with shining eyes turned to her brother from a wheelchair that Buber was pushing. Vishkul's only younger sister, Margella Iviliano. She asked her brother not to be cruel to Bubara. First of all, it was important for Buber Secondly, she could safely attend the banquet only because Buber believed in her and took her with him. Therefore, she asked Vishkul to be patient. Vishkul irritably covered his face with his hand. Buber perked up. He said loudly that he knew that Margella understood him well. He, Bauber Gaston, would willingly become her legs. A group of 3 was quite noticeable because of the wheelchair. In fact, they attracted Jin's attention, and he calmly looked at them, but did not recognize either Vishkul or Buber. He didn't know that Vishkul was the vice leader of Kinzello in his previous life, while Buber changed his appearance thanks to his transformation skills. After a while, Jin looked away from them. People were coming up to talk to him again, so he didn't have the leeway to keep watching them. It was exhausting for Jin to play the role of host. He remembered the Zippels. They were nowhere to be found. He thought about it. Was it worth looking for them? Jin was looking for visitors who arrived at the last moment. Obviously, they were the guests Jin feared the most. However, Jin couldn't find Zippels among the thousands of guests in the hall. Maybe they were hiding in one corner of the room, trying not to attract anyone's attention. Someone put a glass of wine on Jin's table and stood next to him. She asked if he would mind if she dared to ask the rising star of the Rankandel family for a drink. Although her words were polite, her tone was different. It was the voice of a young woman who sounded like she was challenging him. Jin looked into the girl's eyes. Then he couldn't help but chuckle softly, asking who she was. She was Ceres and Dorma of the Ice Palace. She said it was an honor to meet Jin. Ceres smiled thinly, narrowing her eyes. Jin had been expecting this reunion. He stared at Ceres for a few seconds before grabbing the wine bottle. Then, he calmly poured her a glass. Along the way, he said that he was also glad to meet the daughter of the master of the Ice Palace. Ceres asked, how did Jin achieve so much so quickly? They're the same age as him. She said she envied the genetics of the blessed Rankandel family. Although she expressed her envy, Ceres herself was not an ordinary girl either. She was already in the middle phase of the 4th rank and was still growing at an incredible rate. Jin told her that she was also very gifted. First of all, the blood of the Ice Palace itself is a gift. Jin didn't dare to guess how much the head of the Ice Palace treasured her. To the highest degree. After all, unlike Jin, she is the only daughter. She quickly apologized, saying it was rude of her. Ceres' gaze softened a little and she was already smiling. Jin wasn't offended at all. Everyone knows that he is the youngest. He said he envied Ceres with white envy. It was quite exhausting to have so many brothers and sisters. How strange. Jin was sure that the girl recognized him. Then why haven't you started talking about Mamita yet? Not that the soot could completely hide someone's face, and he couldn't change his voice either. Therefore, Jin was sure that Ceres recognized him today. Ceres suddenly leaned closer to Jin. She asked if his leg was okay. Finally, the real conversation was about to begin. Jin smiled and shrugged slightly. He replied that everything was fine. Although he could not respond to the mercy of such a great man who used medicine for his humble good, he answered casually, to which Ceres frowned. Ceres and Dorma said that Jin was behaving more brazenly than it seemed from the outside. She demanded an explanation. What was he doing at the Moonwell that day? Why should he answer? Ceres stated that their people could not find the terrorist magician, and this dealt a strong blow to her pride. Then she wondered if the boy she had let go was not guilty. A magician? Did she think he was a criminal? Ceres was definitely aware of what kind of family he had. His hands from birth held only a sword, not a magic staff. Of course, she didn't think that the genius of the strongest swordsman family could be a magician. However, the Rankandel family assigned the task to Jin, and if he had hired a magician because the scope of the mission is beyond his abilities, then everything would have been different. Besides, of the possible targets of the Rankandels, only the members of the Ice Palace were there. As the head of the Ice Palace's 7-sword squad, she can't just ignore what happened. Jin understood what Ceres was thinking. She misunderstood everything and believed that he was hunting for her people. Considering that Jin inadvertently harmed the members of the Ice Palace by aiming at Alcaro, then there is truth in her words. After reading Ceres' intentions, Jin continued to feign ignorance. He said he didn't understand how it confirmed his involvement. Isn't what she said just her assumptions? She grinned. If Jin was going to play innocent until the end, then she just had to react. Ceres pointed her finger at Jin and loudly declared that she would drag him into the arena and then beat him to a pulp. She wanted to spit in that self-confident face. She wanted Jin to fight her. Jin's father had strictly warned him against fighting with those who were weaker. But if she wanted it that way, then he would make concessions. As soon as they entered the arena, the guardian knight standing inside greeted him. Jin said that everyone except the medics is free. He also asked for 2 swords in good condition. The knight replied that no one would be allowed in until their duel was over. The audience and those who were set up for a good fight will catch up by midnight. Ceres was still the daughter of the Ice Palace master, so Jin decided that breaking her in front of everyone would be too much. Now there were only 2 people standing in the wide circular arena. Before they started, Ceres got a promise from Jin that if he lost, he would tell everything that happened in Mamita that day. without missing a single detail. Jin easily agreed with this. In return, if he wins, she must pretend that she has never seen him in the moon well. Ceres said that Jin seemed to have a guilty conscience. As soon as she finished speaking, Jin rushed over and closed the distance between them. He planned to overcome her with a huge difference in physical abilities. Suddenly, a strange cold energy swirled around Ceres' sword and froze her blade. This was the main reason why the Ice Palace could tower in the middle of the Western Sea, as well as the power that symbolized the Endorma bloodline. 10,000 ice swords. The two blades collided, and the sound of breaking ice echoed through the arena. If Jin hadn't instinctively covered his sword with an aura, his weapon would have shattered into pieces. Jin didn't expect her to use a secret technique from the very beginning. He said he was a little sad because he hadn't learned his family's secret technique yet. What should he do? Ceres grinned. What does it matter to her? She started attacking Jin herself. Jin didn't counterattack and just kept concentrating on his defense. Thus, Ceres believed that victory was assured to her. Horizontal slash, lower slash, now the diagonal. Ceres' fencing was fierce but flexible. Jin moved his whole body to dodge and deflect her attacks. Although it seemed like he was being pushed away, Jin was waiting for an opportunity. Moreover, the fact that he managed to deflect her sword every time proved the superiority of his swordsmanship over Ceres. Soon enough, Ceres realized that her opponent was more restrained than she expected. Jin was without a doubt of the 5th rank. Although he is in a hurry to block her ability, as the battle progresses, his real skills will be revealed. But even so, Ceres was sure that the difference of 1 rank would be more than compensated by 10,000 ice swords of the 3rd level. Jin was superior to her in both strength and endurance, so she couldn't let this battle drag on. He is studying her movements and will counterattack, so she has to put an end to this battle right now. Their messy and chaotic duel slowly but gradually came to a standstill. Over time, they both got used to each other's movements, but there was no reason to delay the fight, and Ceres wasn't the only one who thought so. Jin was slowly switching to footwork, which put him on the offensive, and he had the same thoughts as his opponent. Ceres is a 4th rank sword master. Even if she is able to use 10,000 ice swords, there is no chance that she will be able to defeat him in a fair one-on-one duel. Jin was sure that she was aware of the gulf between them and was preparing to end everything with one blow. She would definitely use a secret technique, but Jin didn't know how strong the ice sword's attack would be. Therefore, Jin decided to use the most powerful secret technique that he himself knew. When he was in Tempest Castle, he didn't just read secret volumes underground to kill time. Needless to say, Ceres didn't know that Jin already knew several secret techniques of various martial arts. Before Jin could decide on a countermeasure, Ceres boldly charged at him. She screamed loudly and swung her sword. Suddenly, a violent blizzard materialized in the arena, spinning in a circle with Ceres in the center. But unlike a blizzard, which forms naturally when the icy wind reached Jin, he received small cuts on his face. Sharp winds tore at his clothes, and cold air bound his neck and joints. The 3rd style of the ice sword is avalanche. As soon as Ceres finished creating this blizzard, the arena turned completely white. Ice crystals formed and exploded with a dull sound, and a pure white aura avalanched into obstacles. The landscape suddenly changed to a snow-covered mountain peak in winter. Snow blocked Jin's vision, and a wave of cold energy made it impossible to breathe. In the center was Ceres with an enthusiastic expression on her face, showing her confidence in victory. But then she saw Jin with the same expression on his face. It was the glow and grin of a man who knew he had already defeated his opponent. For a moment, she felt awkward. But the avalanche was already released. Jin can be a gifted prodigy who reached the 5th rank at the age of 15. But he was definitely not able to resist this secret technique. Then what is this unpleasant feeling? The blade of the sword was right millimeters from her face. She was able to dodge, but the sword began to crumble and soon exploded. He shouted at her to dodge. Either Jin had overestimated the power of the 10,000 ice swords, or the secret technique of the Attila family was much more powerful than he expected. Whatever the answer, Jin regretted using this technique. If she doesn't dodge, Ceres will definitely die. Otherwise, at least she will remain a cripple for life. This destructive power is not something that the 4th rank can handle. Jin's heart was pounding wildly in alarm about her possible death. Meanwhile, Ceres gritted her teeth to suppress her instincts, squatting down. And so a second passed. As soon as the storm of blades subsided, the two fighters exclaimed to themselves. One had a sense of relief, and the other groaned in humiliation. Ceres sat down just as Jin was asking about her condition. Jin threw away the remaining sword hilt in his hand and grabbed Ceres by the shoulders. She just stared into the void with her eyes wide open due to the intense shock. It was her first defeat since she took the sword. When victory was close, but the storm of blades turned the tide of battle, Ceres decided not to dodge the blow. She believed that she was not a weak person who needed to rely on the mercy and pity of her enemies. However, no matter how strong her pride was, no matter how important her honor was compared to her life, no matter how iron-willed she was still a 15-year-old girl. She was too young to voluntarily and forcibly suppress her survival instincts. Jin looked at Ceres for a short time, trying to figure out what to say to her. But he didn't need much time to think. He said that he, too, would have evaded in her place. Therefore, he asked not to discuss it anymore. He didn't know if those words would calm her down. Ceres called him and looked into his eyes. The light returned to her gaze. She pulled out a healing ointment and rubbed it on the place of the abrasion. Ceres claimed that this was payment for saving her life. Jin asked if she didn't rate her life too low, being the most successful in the Ice Palace. That's why she rubbed the ointment carefully. She would start appreciating herself again, so Jin didn't have to worry. They both moved towards the exit of the arena. As soon as they were outside, Ceres added a final comment. She said it was nice to meet you. Today was their first meeting. Saying that they would meet tomorrow, Ceres left Jin. He watched her go. Jin also attended the banquet the next day. There were fewer guests than yesterday. Now it was possible to watch the duels, so the real banquet begins now. Maybe he can meet those guys from Zippel. Jin was curious to know how high their skill in magic was, since he had heard that Zippel's 4 guests were between 15 and 20 years old. They were the best magicians he could compare himself to. Moreover, if he had the opportunity, he would like to ask them about the ruins of Colin. But Jin changed his mind, as it was probably a bad idea. In any case, when he becomes a reserve standard bearer, he will have some free time, in which he will calmly walk through the ruins with Murakin. With his help, finding a fountain of mana will not cause problems. So the Zippel bastards will not be able to continue stamping magicians. This time he will be able to prevent a terrible event. He suddenly noticed a black cat naively walking around the banquet hall. The guests were surprised by the presence of a small cat in the main house of Rankandel, so they could not help but look at him. Jin was sure that Murakin had snuck in without Gilly's knowledge. The boy wasn't sure if the dragon noticed his gaze, but Murakin straightened his tail and walked to the center of the hall. Then he arrived safely at his destination, the lap of Ceres. The girl was satisfied with the affection of the cute pet for her, and she began to stroke him. After a while, she looked at the name tag on the cat collar and burst out laughing. The Rankandel moth. That was the name written on the tag. Ceres laughed for a long time before calming down. The young man spoke to Jin with a sincere, friendly smile. Jin knew this boy, as well as all the exploits and achievements that he would achieve in the future. However, he didn't want to pose as a familiar, even though he was a Zippel that Jin was looking forward to. This is Veridin Zippel. He was finally able to meet Jin again. He can't even imagine how long he's been looking for it. Jin pretended not to recognize him. Veridin couldn't believe Jin was saying that instead of greeting. How could he forget about him? Veridin said he thought about Gina every day. Ceres seemed to have misunderstood Veridin's words. Veridin even gave a hint to Jin. Sighing, Ceres left with Murakin, calling Veridin a crank. Even after the tip, Jin didn't recognize him. Therefore, Veridin gave another attempt and a new hint. But even then, Jin didn't recognize him. At this point, Jin found their communication amusing, so he continued to feign ignorance. Veridin put his hands on Jin's shoulders, saying that his memory is worse than he expected. Veridin said to listen carefully and make sure he memorized his name. When Veridin wanted to give his name, he was interrupted by Jin. If he insisted on acting like he was seeing him for the first time, it should be obvious that he didn't want to show recognition. So Jin asked why Veridin didn't understand him and kept pestering him. He removed his hands. Just to think that by the age of 30, this boy will actually become a magician from the 9th rank and will be elected the next patriarch. Jin also realized how ignorant Veridin was when they first met, but that was just on another level. He was speechless at how ridiculous the situation was, even though Jin bluntly said how tiresome Veridin was. This Zippel didn't let it bother him for too long. He briefly assumed a gloomy expression, but soon resumed the conversation. Veridin said he was looking everywhere for Jin yesterday, and the last 2 hours, too, but I didn't find a trace. No matter how big this hall is, it's just a banquet hall. Did he seriously mean to say that he hadn't found it after 2 hours of searching? Jin spoke as he recalled the previous day. He was the center of attention, and the guests continued to approach him. He was also located in the center of the hall, so even if someone did not want to see him, he inevitably noticed the boy at least once during the evening. Veridin sighed. If he could only use magic, he would find Jin faster. Anyway, Veridin was glad to see Jin, because it had been 5 years since their last meeting. Who would have thought that Jin was already of the 5th rank? He knew Jin would be the cause of some big event the last time he saw him. But Veridin has not been idle all this time either. He has already reached the 6th rank. Veridin received all 6 stars. Veridin was 3 years older than Jin, so by the age of 18 he was already a 6th rank magician. It was a real achievement. It was also worthy of celebration, as was Jin's exceptional growth. However, Jin was very surprised, as the level of Veridin was much lower than he expected, putting aside the stupid act of revealing his abilities in enemy territory. Jin was shocked that the most talented pureblood from the Zippel family was only a 6th rank magician. If Jin had been in his place, he would probably have already received the 7th rank. For what reason did Veridin lie about his rank? Veridin laughed. He was looking for Jin just for that expression. He said he would look forward to the day when he could fight him, so Jin has to work hard to catch up with him. Jin didn't bother to reveal the true reason for his shock. Meanwhile, an unsuspecting Veridin stood with his chest out, thinking that Jin was struck by him. Seeing this, Jin thought that Veridin was hardly hiding his rank. Anyway, if Veridin was actually able to reach the 6th rank only in his 18th year, then after the current head of the Zippel family, Celiac, he is the closest to the top of magic. It was a good opportunity to objectively assess your potential.